In this episode, we uncover a story that reveals the hidden and often painful truths behind a terrible crime. A husband, after having a secret affair with his boss, unknowingly passes HIV to his wife, setting off a series of shocking and violent events. We'll walk you through the heartbreaking details of what happened next and explore the surprising actions the wife took that left everyone speechless. Rob Sanders, 36, seemed to have it all: a stable job as an accountant at a well-known firm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a loving father to 2 kids, and a long-lasting marriage to his wife Jessie of 12 years. Rob and Jessie first crossed paths in 1995 at a church potluck. Jessie, a skilled baker, had brought her signature lemon bars to the potluck. Rob admired her baking, and their shared faith quickly sparked a connection that grew into love. Just 2 years later, they were married in an intimate ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family, filled with hope and excitement for the future. In the beginning, their life together seemed full of happiness. Jessie supported Rob in his career, and they created a cozy home with cherished family traditions. But beneath Rob's picture-perfect life, there was a hidden struggle he could not escape. Growing up in a strict Christian home, Rob pushed aside any feelings of attraction to other men. For years, he tried to ignore these desires, pouring his energy into his faith, family, and career. But over time, the burden of keeping this part of himself hidden became increasingly difficult to manage. In 2008, Rob began to explore this side of himself. What started as private online searches and occasional encounters with men at local bars, like Tulsa's Majestic Lounge, quickly grew into more intense physical relationships. Rob's first gay affair was short-lived, but it opened a door he couldn't shut. By early 2009, he was entangled in a secret affair with his boss, David Carlisle, a charismatic executive at the firm. Their relationship started during a business trip when a casual dinner led to a surprising and intimate encounter. For Rob, the affair with David was a mix of excitement and fear. He was terrified of losing everything: his family, his job, and his reputation. But he couldn't bring himself to end it. In the days before his death, the pressure of living a double life became too much to bear. Jessie had just shared the happy news of her pregnancy, but Rob couldn't shake the guilt he felt. He knew he had unknowingly exposed her to HIV through his secret affairs, and struggled to keep his anxiety hidden. As a result, his behavior became increasingly unpredictable. At work, Rob began to distance himself from David, who had become more possessive and insistent, constantly pressuring him for sex. At home, Rob was distracted, skipping family dinners to take long drives or immerse himself in work. By April 2009, the truth about his double life was slowly starting to come to light. The weight of his lies became unbearable, leaving Rob feeling isolated and overwhelmed with fear. He saw no escape from the web of deception he had created, and tragically, it all led to his death. On April 23, 2009, Rob Sanders' lifeless body was found in his home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Jessie Sanders, Rob's wife, was the one who discovered him. It was late afternoon, around 4:30 p.m., when she returned home after running errands with their 2 children. She had stopped at Walmart for groceries and then picked up a treat at Baskin-Robbins. When they arrived, the house was unusually silent. Jessie called out to Rob, thinking he might be in his home office or watching ESPN in the living room. But instead, she found him lying on the floor near the kitchen table, a half-empty glass of iced tea sitting on the counter nearby. At first, Jessie thought Rob might have fainted, but when she touched him, his skin was cold to the touch. Panic quickly took over. She screamed for help, which startled the children, who began crying in the hallway. Shaking with fear, Jessie quickly dialed 911 and described what she saw. "He's not breathing. He's just lying here. Please, lie down. Please stretch out." The paramedics attempted CPR, but Rob showed no signs of life. He was declared dead at the scene. Jessie's sobs filled the house as neighbors gathered outside, drawn by the commotion. The scene inside the house was strange. Rob's body showed no signs of injury, and everything around him seemed undisturbed. The glass of iced tea, one of Rob's favorites, was taken by paramedics as evidence, though at the time, no one suspected foul play. Jessie's neighbors described her as hysterical. One neighbor, who lived next door, recalled how Jessie ran outside and collapsed on the lawn, holding her children. She just kept repeating, "He can't be gone," over and over, she remembered. At first, it was believed that Rob had suffered a sudden medical emergency, but when the autopsy report showed signs of organ failure, consistent with poisoning, authorities started to suspect something more sinister. What seemed like a tragic accident was actually the start of a shocking criminal investigation. Tulsa police arrived at the Sanders home on the evening of April 23, 2009, shortly after Rob was pronounced dead. Detective Brian Callahan, the lead investigator, took charge of the scene. With 15 years of experience and a reputation as a notorious womanizer, Callahan was known for his sharp instincts and careful, methodical approach. He was determined to uncover what had happened to Rob, a man who appeared to embody the values of a devoted Christian husband and father. The scene offered few immediate clues. The house was neat, with no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Rob's body lay near the kitchen table, where the glass of iced tea remained untouched since paramedics had taken it away. The iced tea was quickly sent for toxicology testing, as Callahan's instincts told him something wasn't right. The autopsy the following morning revealed troubling results. The medical examiner found signs of acute kidney failure and crystal deposits in Rob's organs, clear indicators of ethylene glycol poisoning, a key ingredient in antifreeze. Toxicology tests confirmed that the poison had been ingested hours before Rob's death, turning the investigation from a possible medical emergency to a likely case of foul play. An additional surprise came from post-mortem blood tests. Rob tested positive for HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases, a discovery that shocked Detective Callahan and his team. It contradicted the image Rob had carefully built as a devoted family man, an active churchgoer, and a volunteer in the community. Callahan recognized that Rob's HIV status added a personal and complex layer to the case, raising new questions about his private life. As detectives continued their search through the Sanders' home, they uncovered more odd details. Rob's laptop, stored in his home office, contained a mix of work documents and troubling search history, including sites related to gay porn and dating platforms for men seeking other men. Rob's cell phone, found in his pocket, revealed text messages and emails with a contact named Hot Buns, later identified as David Carlisle, Rob's boss. These discoveries painted a starkly different picture of Rob's life than the one his friends and family had known. With these revelations, the police faced growing pressure to handle the case with care. With the toxicology report confirming poisoning and Rob's hidden life coming to light, the investigation took a darker turn, leading into a web of betrayal, secrets, and heartbreak. As the police dug deeper into the Sanders home, their attention began to shift toward Rob's wife, Jessie Sanders. Known for her active role in church and community theater, Jessie had a reputation for being emotional and dramatic, often quick to express her feelings. Initially, investigators approached Jessie with sympathy, recognizing the shock of losing a spouse. However, a search of her personal laptop revealed a different side to the story. As detectives examined her computer, they found troubling search queries in her browsing history. Jessie had also recently visited websites selling ethylene glycol, the substance that had been confirmed as the cause of Rob's poisoning. When confronted with this evidence, her response was a mixture of denial and exaggerated grief. Detective Callahan, who led the interview, noted that her behavior seemed overly dramatic. She was crying, clutching her chest and pretending to vomit in a way that didn't feel genuine, Callahan later recalled. It was more like a scene from a telenovela than someone dealing with real grief, a judgment he felt confident making from his years of dealing with people and, admittedly, his own experiences with women. The police, known for their blunt approach, chose this moment to drop another bombshell. When Jessie was told that Rob had tested positive for HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases, her reaction was intense. She screamed, tore at her shirt, and pounded her fists on the table, insisting that she had no knowledge of his diagnosis. However, her over-the-top response raised eyebrows among the investigators, who were already skeptical due to her theater background. Jessie claimed she had been completely unaware of Rob's health issues or his alleged infidelity, describing him as a perfect husband and father who'd never betray her. However, Callahan and his team couldn't ignore the suspicious timing of her internet searches and her strained relationship with Rob in the months before his death. Further interviews with friends and family revealed that Jessie had become more withdrawn and irritable in recent months. Some neighbors noted that her behavior seemed to shift after Rob started working longer hours and spending more time away from home. She had a way of making everything about her, one neighbor said, but you could tell something was eating her up inside. Although Jessie continued to deny any wrongdoing, the growing evidence pointed to her having the motive, means, and opportunity to poison her husband. Detectives began to build their case, though Jessie's dramatic reactions led them to question whether her grief was real or just part of an act. As the investigation deepened, the focus shifted to David Carlisle, Rob's boss and one of his secret lovers. David, 48, was a smooth and charismatic executive at the accounting firm where Rob worked. On the outside, he presented himself as a successful family man with a wife and children. But privately, he led a secret life, engaging in hidden gay relationships that completely contradicted his public image. In April 2009, detectives visited David at his Tulsa office on a crisp morning. The building, with its polished signage and professional atmosphere, suggested success. But the conversation inside David's office was far from ordinary. When confronted, David initially denied knowing anything about Rob's HIV status or his death, but when detectives showed him the explicit text messages and emails between him and Rob, the facade quickly collapsed. David admitted to having an affair with Rob, calling their relationship complicated. David explained that he and Rob had started their secret relationship a year earlier during late nights working on a high-stakes corporate project. He also admitted to having other affairs with men, attributing it to his struggle with sex addiction. "I wasn't thinking with my head, I was thinking with my other part," David admitted. The detectives pressed him on whether he knew he had exposed Rob or any of his other partners to HIV or other STDs. David reluctantly acknowledged that his reckless lifestyle put him at risk of both contracting and spreading diseases, though he insisted he was unaware of being HIV-positive. David's casual attitude toward the consequences of his actions raised alarm with investigators. As they dug deeper into his past, a troubling pattern emerged. Police discovered that he often visited gay bars in nearby cities, well beyond the reach of his professional and personal circles. A stack of receipts from upscale venues, including Club Majestic in Tulsa and the Copa in Oklahoma City, provided further proof of David's hidden life. David also admitted that his relationship with Rob had become strained in recent months. He claimed that Rob had started making subtle threats about exposing their affair, especially after David had tried to distance himself. "He said he'd tell my wife and ruin my career," David said, his voice shaking with agitation during the interrogation. While his confession offered insight into Rob's private struggles, it also cast a shadow of suspicion over David. Police began to wonder if, in a desperate bid to protect his reputation, David might have been driven to silence Rob for good. David's candid admission raised more questions than answers, leaving detectives wondering if there was more to the story than he was willing to reveal. By late April 2009, the investigation into Rob Sanders' death took a startling turn when two key pieces of evidence came to light, unraveling an even more complex web of betrayal and deceit. The first crucial discovery came when detectives examined Jessie Sanders' medical records and phone activity, suspecting there was more to her story than she had let on. Investigators discovered that Jessie had been diagnosed with HIV just 2 weeks before Rob's death, a fact she had intentionally kept from the police. Even more shocking was the revelation that she was 6 weeks pregnant at the time of her diagnosis. Her decision to hide these crucial details raised serious questions about her motives and mindset in the days leading up to Rob's death. Detectives uncovered this information by subpoenaing Jessie's medical records from a local clinic. The records not only confirmed her HIV diagnosis, but also revealed she had sought counseling for severe emotional distress. The timing of these visits coincided with Jessie's internet searches for undetectable poisons, deepening the suspicion that she had planned the crime in advance. The revelation of Jessie's involvement shocked the investigative team. Interviews with Jessie's family and friends described him as a strict but caring patriarch, often outspoken about traditional values. The irony of his secret double life was not lost on the detectives, who now had to consider whether he might be connected to Rob's death. The discovery of Rob's relationship with J.D. completely reframed the investigation. Detectives were now dealing with a case marked by multiple layers of betrayal. Jessie's hidden anger over her HIV diagnosis, Rob's secret affairs with men, and J.D.'s covert relationship with his own son-in-law. Each new piece of evidence deepened the mystery and shifted the direction of the investigation. While Jessie remained a primary suspect, J.D.'s secret affair introduced a complex motive for both him and his daughter. Police now had to determine whether Jessie acted alone, or if the shame of her father's affair had led them to conspire together against Rob. As police dug deeper into the life of John Jensen, they uncovered a man of sharp contradictions. At 56, J.D. was a retired contractor and a well-known figure in his small Oklahoma town. He was widely recognized for his strong support of conservative family values, a platform he had actively promoted during an unsuccessful run for local office in 2007. J.D. was a regular at town hall meetings, spoke at church events, and frequently wrote letters to the Tulsa World, decrying what he saw as the erosion of traditional Christian morals. But behind closed doors, J.D. led a starkly different life. Investigators discovered that he had been involved in a series of secret sexual relationships with men, many of whom were well-known figures in the community. J.D.'s double life remained a closely guarded secret until investigators began unraveling his connection to Rob Sanders. The relationship between J.D. and Rob started out innocently enough. J.D. would often visit Rob at his home, helping with handyman tasks or spending time with his grandchildren. Rob, also grappling with his own sexual identity, found solace in J.D.'s easygoing nature. Their conversations grew more personal, with JD opening up about his own struggles and regrets over living a life shaped by societal expectations. According to text messages and emails recovered by police, their friendship took a romantic turn one evening in late 2008. After a long day of home repairs, the two men sat on the back porch, sharing a six-pack of Bud Light and reflecting on their lives. JD confided in Rob about his past affairs with men and the constant fear of being exposed. Moved by JD's vulnerability, Rob opened up about his own struggles and feelings of isolation. What started as a comforting hug soon escalated into a passionate kiss, marking the beginning of their secret affair. Despite his public stance on morality, JD had been sexually involved with several influential men in town over the years, including business owners and members of the church board. Police learned that these encounters were typically brief and emotionally detached, unlike his relationship with Rob, which seemed to have a deeper, more emotional connection. When questioned, JD was defensive and evasive, insisting the affair had been consensual and private. However, the revelation of their relationship added a new layer of complexity to the investigation. Detectives now had to consider whether JD's connection to Rob and the potential fallout if their affair became public could have driven him to play a role in Rob's murder. The truth about Rob Sanders' murder was finally uncovered when police pieced together a timeline of events and a mountain of evidence that pointed directly to her wife, Jessie Sanders. Beneath her facade as a devoted mother and grieving widow, Jessie was concealing a deep well of anger, betrayal, and desperation. Her life had started to unravel in the months leading up to Rob's death. Learning about Rob's HIV diagnosis and his secret affairs, including one with her own father, left Jessie feeling humiliated and trapped. As a devout Christian deeply involved in her church, she feared the scandal would destroy her reputation and her children's future. According to a friend who spoke with detectives, Jessie once confided that Rob's actions had ruined everything, and she didn't know how she could go on living like this. That evening, Jessie prepared Rob's favorite drink, iced tea. He loved it on warm spring days, and she thought it would be a comforting choice after a long day at work. But what Rob didn't know was that she had spiked the iced tea with antifreeze, a slow-acting poison that would cause severe organ damage and ultimately take his life. Jessie, despite her outward devotion, was now caught in a cycle of deep betrayal and rage. As Rob sat down to enjoy his drink, she watched him, her emotions torn. Was she angry? Yes. Was she devastated? Absolutely. But as the minutes ticked by and Rob began to feel the effects of the poison, Jessie kept her calm on the surface, hiding her inner turmoil behind a mask of composure. By the time Rob became violently ill, it was already too late. He collapsed in the living room, unable to fight the effects of the poison. Jessie pretended to be horrified, calling 911 and attempting to assist her husband. But when paramedics arrived, they found Rob unresponsive and in critical condition. Despite their best efforts, Rob was pronounced dead at the scene. Initially, it was thought to be a sudden medical emergency, but when the autopsy results came back, something didn't add up. The toxicology report revealed antifreeze poisoning, prompting investigators to re-examine the circumstances of his death. It was no longer an unfortunate accident. It was a carefully planned murder. As police began to dig deeper into Jessie's actions in the days leading up to Rob's death, they uncovered a chilling truth. Jessie had been researching poisons online, with a particular focus on antifreeze. Her search history revealed chilling inquiries about undetectable poisons and how to kill someone with antifreeze. It was clear now that Jessie had meticulously planned Rob's murder. Driven by the betrayal of his secret life and the devastation of discovering she had contracted HIV from him, Jessie cracked under the weight of the evidence. When confronted during interrogation, she shifted between defiant denials and dramatic sobbing. Her background in community theater made detectives skeptical of her overly emotional display. Jessie was arrested on May 5, 2009, and charged with first-degree murder. For her, it was the ultimate humiliation. As cameras from local news stations like KTUL Channel 8 captured her being led away in handcuffs, Jessie shouted, "I did it for my baby." Her words, though dramatic, revealed the twisted justification behind her crime. By February 2010, Jessie Sanders' murder trial was underway. The courtroom in Tulsa, Oklahoma was packed with spectators, journalists, and family members from both sides. The prosecution portrayed Jessie as a jealous, calculating woman who couldn't handle the humiliation of her husband's infidelity and secret life. In contrast, the defense presented a different argument, a battered wife defense, not based on physical violence, but on emotional abuse and betrayal. Jessie's lawyers claimed that Rob's actions, specifically knowingly exposing her to HIV, constituted a severe form of abuse. The defense argued that Jessie acted in self-defense, driven by intense emotional and psychological distress from Rob's lies and reckless behavior. HIV is a life sentence, her lead attorney, Karen Fullerton, declared during opening statements. By giving her this disease, Rob Sanders stole from Jessie her health, her future, and her dignity. The defense presented evidence that Jessie had only discovered her HIV diagnosis weeks before the murder. Medical records showed she was under immense stress, battling depression, and had sought counseling through her church. Friends and family testified that Jessie had been a devoted wife and mother, and that she had been blindsided by Rob's double life. In a particularly emotional moment, Jessie took the stand. Sobbing, she described how her world had shattered after learning of Rob's HIV status and his affairs with men, one of which was with her own father. "He broke every promise he ever made to me," she said. "I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared and angry. I didn't want him to hurt me or our children anymore." The defense focused heavily on the argument that Rob's deceit amounted to emotional abuse, citing studies on the psychological toll of betrayal in marriages. They also emphasized Rob's reckless sexual history, portraying him as a man who endangered Jessie's health. Despite these arguments, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution. Jessie Sanders was convicted of first-degree murder. The verdict shocked many in the community, some of whom had sympathized with her. While some believed the betrayal she endured from Rob was unbearable, others maintained that no matter the emotional pain, murder could never be justified. Jessie's face remained stoic as the verdict was read. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the weeks that followed, her family grappled with the harsh reality of the woman they had once known, now convicted of such a heinous crime. Jessie, for her part, showed little remorse. In interviews following her conviction, she maintained that Rob had deserved what happened to him, revealing the depth of her bitterness. The aftermath of Rob Sanders' death cast a long shadow over everyone involved, and their fates became inextricably linked in ways none of them could have predicted. By February 2010, nearly a year after Rob's murder, the lives of Rob's closest confidants, David, J.D., and Jessie, had been irrevocably altered. Jessie Sanders, convicted of poisoning her husband Rob with antifreeze, was serving a lengthy prison sentence. While incarcerated, she gave birth to a baby boy, but tragically, the child was born HIV-positive, a consequence of Jessie's own hidden condition. In prison, she faced daily struggles, not only as an inmate, but also as a mother raising a child with a serious health issue. The birth of her baby in prison was a grim reminder of how far Jessie's life had spiraled. Once a respected member of her community, she was now a convicted murderer, raising her child under the most challenging of circumstances. Her baby required constant medical care due to the HIV infection, and Jessie's ability to provide the necessary care in prison was severely limited. The revelation of J.D.'s affair with Rob sent shockwaves through the community. J.D., a man who had long been a vocal advocate for conservative family values and had even run for local office, now found himself at the center of a scandal that shattered his carefully cultivated image. His affair with Rob, especially given the secretive nature of their relationship, added a layer of hypocrisy to his public persona that many found difficult to reconcile. J.D. faced not only personal humiliation but also legal and social repercussions as the community struggled to come to terms with the truth about his double life. In the years following Rob's death, J.D.'s reputation was irrevocably damaged, and he became a pariah in the very circles he had once been a respected figure in. The once proud man, who had championed the sanctity of family and morality, was now forced to confront the consequences of his actions that had torn apart both his family and another, forever altering the lives of those involved. J.D.'s downfall was swift and unforgiving. His affair with Rob, coupled with the discovery of his secret gay relationships with other influential men in town, dismantled everything he had built over the years. The community, which had once seen him as a pillar of morality and family values, now viewed him as a hypocrite and a liar. His political ambitions were extinguished overnight, and the social circles that once embraced him turned their backs. J.D.'s reputation, carefully cultivated through years of public service and church involvement, was in tatters. The same people who had once rallied behind him now questioned the sincerity of every word he'd spoken about family, faith, and community. His participation in the local church became a subject of scorn as congregants grappled with the incongruity between his public persona and his private life. The scandal even reached into his own family. J.D.'s daughter, Jessie, had been deeply hurt by the revelation of his affair with Rob, as it compounded the already profound betrayal she felt over Rob's infidelity and their secret lives. The once close family dynamic was shattered, and the strain of these revelations caused irreparable damage to their relationships. Jessie, already grappling with the unraveling of her marriage, now had to contend with the added layer of her father's involvement in the very events that led to Rob's death. In the years following the affair's exposure, J.D. became a cautionary tale. Once admired for his strong stance on traditional family values, he was now a symbol of the dangers of living a double life. He withdrew from public life, avoiding media attention and distancing himself from his former social circles. But despite the damage to his reputation, J.D. never publicly acknowledged his role in Rob's death, maintaining a defensive stance to the end. For J.D., the true cost of his hypocrisy was not just the loss of his political career or his public standing. It was the deep, lasting impact it had on his family, especially his relationship with Jessie, which had been irreparably damaged. He would forever be remembered not as the upstanding pillar of the community he once aspired to be, but as a man whose secrets led to tragedy for those closest to him.